In this video, I'm going to react to Seniesa Estrada's win last night on ESPN Plus, as well as her call out of Yokasta Valle as the two were in the ring. That would create an undisputed strawweight world title. If that sounds good to you, stick around. We're doing it. So Seniesa Estrada beat Leonela Yudica. I don't really know if that's how you say her first name. I know her last name is Yudica. And it was a darn tootin' good fight. It was really, really competitive. I think the problem with Seniesa is she kind of embodies two things, two Hall of Fame fighters, which probably speaks to her future in the sport. She has a little bit of Roy Jones, where she's fighting really good fighters, and if she doesn't look extremely good, people go, "What's wrong with Seniesa?" Rather than, being reasonable and saying, "Hey, maybe this person's really good." She also has Inoue in her, in the sense that we have to almost think about like the highest possible weight in order for a fight to be competitive. This fight against Yudica, what made the fight so competitive was Yudica was a world champion at flyweight. She came down 2 weight classes to challenge Estrada, and because of that, there were issues that were presented based on size, dimensions, frame. She was taller. She was able to hit her with straight punches. The competitive nature of this fight is outlined best in numbers. Though Estrada outlanded and outthrew Yudica and Estrada landed the same total connect percentage through 9 rounds at 29%, which kind of tells you that outside of a little bit more activity, which probably swayed the judges to Estrada, the fight was extremely close. And it was forcing Estrada to have to do things that she hadn't seen. What I found positive about the fight was, against Tiny Tina, Estrada had to fight off the back foot and be a versatile, creative back foot boxer. In this fight, she had to come forward and create her own offensive opportunities. Essentially, she had to fight 2 different ways with 2 different strategies in 2 different consecutive fights to make unified world title defenses, or win a unified title and then make a defense. After the fight, the big headlines were kind of Yokasta Valle with Golden Boy Promotions. Very beautiful, very talented boxer. They both are really, really noticeable figures in the sport of boxing. Valle really, really done a great job over probably the past 2 years at becoming someone that's actually a well-known name in the sport of boxing. Estrada, I think, has been in that spot probably for about 5 years as probably the only flyweight or under women's boxer that people are aware of in the sport. She's really done a great job at getting her name out there, putting together great performances, and getting big promoters behind her. Golden Boy Promotions got behind her early in her career, and now she's with Top Rank on ESPN, an industry leader. This performance is gonna actually help probably make the Valle fight, because this performance created some doubt. This was a 96, 94, 97, 93 type win. All 3 judges had it 97, 93 for Estrada. Could have been a little closer. If you wanted to give Yudica every moment of every round, you could probably even score the fight for her if you gave her every benefit of the doubt. I wouldn't have, but that's what I think someone could if they wanted to make that argument. For the post-fight, it was interesting because something came out that I'd never thought of, but Estrada said, "I'm going to beat you." When she looked at Valle, she said, "I'm going to beat your coach," which is Coach G, Right Hook Roxy's mom, who's also Valle's coach, and a very good coach. She's a well-respected coach in LA, and she has a lot of really good fighters like Kid Kansas, and obviously her daughter as well, really well respected. So I guess there's some form of like an LA feud there, because they both are in LA, so they probably both been talking trash to one another. And then the surprise was, "And I'm going to beat Golden Boy Promotions," which to me, I never knew this, but it looks like Seniesa left on not the greatest terms with Golden Boy Promotions, which I was unaware of at that time. So for Estrada, it seems like there's a level of personal to this bout, not just being undisputed, but she wants to prove a point to a former promoter, to a coach that's been critical of her, it seems, and to a fighter who's basically going after the same fan base she is. For Valle, I think that if she were to win this fight, a big if, but I think it's possible, she could actually inhabit a space like Alicia Baumgardner, a fighter who's very talented, went under the radar, and then in Baumgardner's case, she beat Michaela Mayer and became an A-list celebrity. I think that Valle, what I saw last night with her in a designer dress and willing to talk that trash, there's a bit of Baumgardner in Valle. Valle basically said to Seniesa Estrada, she was talking that ish. She said, if you want to fight me, you got to come to Costa Rica because I fill up stadiums, not theaters. She said it point blank, period, talking about how Estrada had trouble getting people to come in. Now, this is a thinly veiled shot because I don't think that that's a great representation of Estrada's drawing power, because it's the night before Errol Spence, Terence Crawford, a generational fight that people are excited for, and the Friday before it, though there are fights for the hardcore enthusiasts, that's typically like get really drunk night for a lot of patrons that are going to go out and see that fight the next day. So I don't think it's the best sample size, but I do think there is some truth in that statement, and that's why that statement hurt. Is Valle has a bigger appeal in Costa Rica, and she has fought on the world stage. She has traveled to fight other people across the world. Estrada's mostly fought in the United States, and I think that is an interesting point. With these two doing these antics, now we're going to see who really wants this fight. I believe Estrada really wants this fight, but Valle didn't back down. Up until this point, it has looked through the perception, which is always reality, as though Valle was kind of looking to make a title defense, make some money, and then go into this fight. Her being there and being willing to go into the ring and talk trash really makes me wonder, is this fight closer than I first anticipated? I hope this fight can get done in the final quarter of 2023, because these are the type of fights that get everybody excited. And I think that this is the type of fight that it should land on some big card. It should land on a big card because this is a big opportunity for both fighters. And really, it's going to create a star. So I hope Seniesa gets that, because Seniesa and, if we're being honest, Yokasta Valle deserve it, because they deserve the opportunity to become not just a star, which they both are, a superstar in boxing. The winner of that becomes a superstar. Not unlike how tonight, Terence Crawford, Errol Spence, the winner of that fight becomes a superstar. The guy that loses, star. Winner, superstar. Bigger than the sport itself. I wanted to touch on a couple small things from the undercard. We saw Xavier Martinez lose to Andres Cortes. Andres Cortes wins the fight, gets a stoppage. He was talking prior to the fight about getting the stoppage, does get the stoppage. Looks like a true world-class contender, but sadly, the story of the fight will be Robert Garcia stopping the fight between rounds 7 and 8. He stops it in the corner. It was a very close fight. Andres Cortes was up on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards, but Martinez was up on 1. It was very competitive. I think Cortes was starting to land a little bit more at distance, and he had busted open underneath the eye of Xavier Martinez to the point where there was a big cut. And when Martinez went back, it was very, very close. Robert Garcia didn't hear the urgency in Martinez's voice. He heard, from what I heard from Robert's post-fight interview, was Xavier basically saying, whatever you think, I'll accept. And I think what Garcia heard was a fighter who was not really that motivated to keep going in a fight. And he's someone that's willing to stop a fight early as opposed to let someone take on excessive damage. Now, the reason this is unfortunate for Andreas is he has the biggest win of his career, gets a win over a very, very good fighter, very talented fighter, big puncher, strong fighter, and the outcome will overshadow the result. And what I mean by that is the fact that it was a very close fight. Cortes, more than likely at that point, probably would have swung the tide and won the last few rounds, but because it was a stoppage, because it was such a competitive fight, very interesting fight, because the way the fight ended was so debatable, that kind of hurt the perception of the victory to me a little bit, because Cortes, he's calling for all these big names. He says, I want Valdez, I want Navarrete winner. He wants a big fight, but it's hard to also not listen to Robert Garcia after the fight when they go straight from Andres Cortes, what do you want to do with your career? And he says all these things. And then they're like, Robert Garcia, why'd you stop the fight? And that's like more fascinating. And it's just the nature of this business. But sometimes when these outcomes happen in certain ways, the outcome dictates how we look at the perception of the fight. Just some housekeeping stuff on this undercard in case you're not a sicko like me and watched everything. Nahir Albright, who's promoted by Rodney Rice's RDR Promotions, got a majority decision win over Karlos Balderas. It is crazy to think about where Karlos Balderas' career has gone, because 7 years ago, Karlos Balderas was probably one of the people that I thought there was no way this guy is going to miss as a professional. He's an exceptional talent. He's something special. And what we've seen is just, I don't want to say missteps, but it's the same great fighter from the amateurs. He's struggled to transition as a pro. I'm kind of comparing Balderas currently to someone like Javier Molina, where maybe when he gets older and experience and kind of settles into his own whatever he wants to be, then he can maybe get that big opportunity and live up to his potential. But seeing him lose to Nahir Albright, where Albright basically just won this fight on angles and a jab, being busy with the jab, throwing the jab. It's a very winnable fight. Now, don't get me wrong, Nahir Albright is someone that I really think highly of. I think Albright is pretty much at the same level of a Jermaine Ortiz. Ortiz has left the division, so the opportunities Albright was getting, or Jermaine Ortiz was getting, Albright should get. But this was mildly shocking to see Karlos Balderas lose to a fighter who, is right now currently a regional fighter with 2 losses. And Karlos lost in an 8-round fight. It wasn't even a 10-round fight. So I'm not sure what Balderas' future is with Top Rank, but this has got to be a devastating thing, because it was the type of fight, if we're being honest, where both fighters probably left the fight thinking that they won the fight. And those fights typically are the ones where neither fighter really did just enough, and it comes down to how the judges perceived the fight. The judges favored the cleaner shots of Albright over Balderas. It's a tough one, and for those that follow the channel and the smaller fighters, that's something you probably want to know. And Dante Benjamin fighting 27 days after his knockout win on July 1st, which is crazy that was 27 days ago, because it feels way longer. I believe the night that I watched that fight, I also went to see Asteroid City, the last movie I've seen in the theater, or it was Indiana Jones. I can't remember. We did a back-to-back movie day. But here's the thing. He fought William Langston. William Langston holds a win over Caleb Hernandez. Caleb Hernandez is a really good fighter. And to hold a win over a fighter of that caliber, you have to be pretty friggin' good. They fought to a draw. I think a draw was a fair outcome, but what I saw in this fight is Dante has to go to another level if he wants to get to the 8 and 10 round fights, because what I saw with Dante Benjamin was a fighter who's winning fights off of being young and athletic and more coordinated than his opponents. And as the fight got more grueling and longer, he started getting wore down by the bigger, more experienced fighter in William Langston. And thankfully for his sake, this was a 6-round fight, because if this had gone 8 rounds, the tide would have changed in this fight. So right now, I think that Benjamin's ceiling as a fighter, until he kind of makes some adjustments, is going to be in the 6-round department, which is, there's nothing wrong. Dante's a fighter. I think he's very good, but I think he's a work in progress. He's not one of these guys that can jump the 4-round to 6-round to 8-round. He can't jump it as quick as other fighters. So there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that it's also, this is going to be a grueling mental component, because for William Langston and his team, they're going to go back and go, okay, we feel like we won the fight. We got a draw on this big promoter's card. They're going to feel really good. Now they're going to have forward momentum. For Dante Benjamin, young kid, has a grueling fight, 50-50 fight. He was thinking this is going to move him up in the ranks. He's going to get all these cool things, probably get something cool he wanted to do. Now he's got to ask himself difficult questions, and one is, how do I get better, or what do I improve on? Now, there's 2 ways that goes. If he stagnates, he doesn't work on it. If he gets better, he does. There's also another thing. Learning is not the same for everybody, so it could take a year, it could take 3 days, it could take 5 years. But now we have an assessment tool to look back on this fight. Was this a cautionary tale, or is this just the classic good hard fight that develops a great fighter? We will know soon, but that is one that you should go back and look at. Charlie Sheehy opened up the card. It's unfortunate he fought at 4:30 p.m. on the West Coast because not a lot of fight fans got to see him. A good, deceptive lead left hook laid out his opponent. Kalen Alfred, really, really good fighter. Charlie Sheehy competing in 6-round fights. The way he's looking as though, I believe he's at 7 pro fights, might be at 8 or 9 by the end of the year. He's getting close with his amateur experience to getting in those 8-round professional fights pretty soon. And when you get to the 8 and 10-round fights, those are where the really, really good fighters are at. He's in a good divisional lightweight, really, really big for that weight class. Kind of got the Jermaine Ortiz physique for that weight class. Charlie Sheehy is someone that I think if you're a hardcore fight enthusiast, if you like watching fighters who have potential to win not just a world title, but world titles in multiple divisions, Charlie's someone to watch because Charlie's a special, special fighter, and he's someone to keep an eye on. So go back and watch Charlie's fight on the Stockton show, a local show that happened out in Stockton, California. They threw a show on a Friday night. Two notable upsets happened. Diuhl Olguin, probably one of the best club fighters of this generation, came in and beat Irving Xilohua, I believe is how you say his name. We did a feature on him for ITR Boxing on OnlyFans, and it was an interesting fight because what you saw was, I think the idea for this fight was to garner Irving some experience through getting a guy who has beaten really good fighters. He's beaten David Navarro, who David, I think, was the runner-up to Bruce Carrington at the Olympic trials in 2019. He's beaten really, really, really good fighters, right? And the idea was, how can we probably skip the line and get this guy higher in the rankings and get him bigger opportunities by beating Diuhl Olguin, a very, very good fighter, but someone with a really bad record and someone that maybe in theory, if you take him to that place where you think he might lose, he might find comfort because he's lost so much, he might have a pattern of losing. So if you have a close fight with him like Malachi Johnson had, maybe he'd lose instead of win. Well, in this fight, what happened was Irving's a very good fighter, but there's just some things he needs to work on, in my opinion. And one was he was relying on power and size a lot as opposed to kind of picking his shots, looking, and that's just experience, right? So in these fights he's been having, he's been able to be bigger and more physically imposing. This was a veteran opponent where you needed to have multiple dimensions. Not saying he doesn't have that, but he doesn't have the experience just yet in order to go between various styles. So in this fight, what happened to Irving was, in my perception, he started out strong, but then Diuhl Olguin took him into deep waters, began to land good shots to the body, and then as Irving showed maybe that the shots affected him, Diuhl got stronger because he knew he was in the fight. Diuhl pulls off an upset win over Irving. I'm sure they're probably going to rematch it at some point. Diuhl is just really friggin' impressive because he consistently does this. And for Irving, if you're watching this, Diuhl is a really good fighter. He's like a 20-3 type fighter who just took every fight offered to him and probably didn't have full camps. But he's a really good fighter. I think that there's no shame in losing to a fighter like that. So that happened. Then Wade Jones lost to Marco Cardenas. Cardenas had lost to a guy who was on Top Rank. I think he was an Espinosa boxing fighter, but before that he had beaten King Gio. In this fight, what I saw was Wade Jones, to me, looks like he's between two styles. It looks like he's kind of trying to box a bit, but then he also feels more natural, like technical brawling. Got into a weird mid-range and was standing kind of tall. Cardenas, early in the third round, was just very, very confident to throw overhand rights. And Wade kind of stood tall and got tagged with two of them. And when you're in with a guy who can throw everything they have on a shot and it lands, sometimes they connect and sometimes they disconnect you. And no fault of Wade's own. Well, I mean, besides the defense liability, he got hit with a good shot, and that's just, anyone that knows anything about boxing knows if you get hit with a good shot, sometimes weird things happen. So Cardenas is showing that on this regional circuit, he's as good as any fighter despite their record. Like when Cardenas comes to Stockton, he's at that same tier as the regional fighters that are fighting in Stockton. The question is, can Cardenas pull this type of upset off against a world-rated fighter on like a Matchroom or a U.S. card? He hasn't really done that. So this win gets him an opportunity probably back on television. And sadly, like honestly, on the negative side, this loss for Wade probably gets him an opportunity against an emerging prospect in the near future. Because, I mean, he looked vulnerable at times, but knowing Wade and seeing Wade, I know that Wade has more to offer than just this performance. But as we always say, perception is reality. Favoritism is part of the game. When you have a performance of this that is of this quality, which isn't the performance I think you wanted to have, this is when the big promoters are going to call you and be like, here's my kid with 150 amateur fights. It's his 5th fight. We'd like to fight you. So the silver lining is if Wade gets on his grind, he can possibly upset one of those guys. But those opportunities will probably come in, and Marco Cardenas, I wouldn't even be surprised if he gets an opportunity with a bigger name person, possibly just starting out to go rounds, because he looked a lot like Murata. I think it was Murata, the Japanese fighter on Top Rank. He had an opponent that had a very unsexy record, but was very durable. I want to say it was Juan Centeno. And that was impressive, like the way he picked him apart. But you see these guys pop up early on the undercards, and you go, what? This guy's record isn't sexy. And then you look deeper and you go, oh, he's been beating people on the regional circuit, built his way back up. Brad Goodman, Bruce Trampler brought him in and gets a good one. So those are my thoughts. Leave a comment. Big fight day. Hopefully this is enjoyable for you. I'm dropping some videos next week. Probably not as many videos, but I appreciate you. Thank you for watching.